days after we get back, we're sitting there, Tom Gregory is reading off of this thing and his laptop dies. And so he picks this up and just keeps reading from the paper. And so I nudged Heather, I was like,
see?
Paper backup. See? Always have a paper backup.
Heather's like,
I'm gonna
whatever,
resume
man.
the recording.
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Okay, it's now 5:36. We'll return to the open meeting. Moving on to business items, new business. Item number one, Anthony Carlson and Sarah Jack's campaign managers.
I think yes, if you just go right.
Yeah.
Just off. Do you need more for?
You want us at the podium or at the table? Wherever you hear, we hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, that's fine. I have other tools to help.
I'm just gonna claim it.
And I have to go like this. Oh,
There we go.
Coming out of the dark.
I don't know which one.
into the light we come. Do we need it this bright or can I do that a little?
Turn it down just twice in the
That'd be
sky.
great, my God.
That was, yeah.
I have a hard time
It's like an
seeing people on
assault.
the screen.
Yeah.
Now it is.
Exactly. Oh, why did you? I was sitting here, Scott, you saw.
Oh, I know.
I did not, yeah, just saying.
Can we do one more?
Moral.
No,
Do you want to stay here?
Oh, you know.
there we go. That'll be done.
That's perfect.
Thank you. Unless it automatically does it.
I actually turned it off because it sounds like there's a mic up here already.
It's okay. If you need it. Yeah.
Hi, sir.
Perfect. Awesome. I was waiting for the okay. So it's great to actually get to be here and to present to you guys and talk to you about, your potential of exploring placing something on the November ballot for the library district. My name is Anthony Carlson. My colleague Sarah Britton Jack is over here as well. And we've been courted by, a group who's standing up a campaign committee to actually lead an effort should such one appear on the ballot. Now, my goal here today is not to convince you guys to make a decision one way or another on going to the ballot. That's fully your guys' choice as a board of trustees, to weigh the pros and cons of appearing on this November's ballot and to make a decision that you think is best for the library district. So I'm not here to try to do that for you guys today.
Okay.
I'll turn this mic back on. Is that better? There we go.
Yeah.
But what I do want to do today is I do want to provide, my views and thoughts on what this November's electorate is going to look like here and across the country, and provide any advice that I can provide to you guys with helping you make the decision that you feel is best for the library district. So first of all, this isn't a decision that we've arrived at to this point of being this far along in the process that we've made with the idea, just kind of pulling numbers out of the air and just kind of wishing and hoping that maybe the voters will support an effort that's been on the ballot. So over the past year, the library district partnered with a firm called WPAI Intelligence. It's a nationally reputable polling firm that does work for folks all over the country, trying to seek election to office, or running ballot initiatives on the ballot. Some of the examples of the work that they've done, for example, is they work with Glenn Youngkin, the current governor of Virginia. They were actually instrumental to his campaign and him being elected in Virginia. They've worked with organizations such as the Las Vegas Raiders and trying to figure out their move from Oakland to Las Vegas. And so this polling data is data that I believe that we can fully take to the bank and trust, and know that when we're seeing this data points, that it is reflective of what the actual intentions and will is of folks in the Pikes Peak region. And so just starting off and kind of digging into this a little bit, one of the things that is particularly interesting to me is the actual public opinion of folks in El Paso County towards the library district. Typically, if you're an elected official, you're lucky to break 50% on a score of asking people if they are supportive of you or your campaign. If you're a public institution, you're lucky to get into the 60s. And what we saw from this polling is over 90% of the people who responded to both of these surveys over two different pollers say they actually have a really great perspective and view of the library district. Specifically, if we asked them if the library district was an entity that should be protected and preserved in El Paso County, over 90% of the people who responded to that question, and NO 400 in that survey, said that they believe the library is an important institution in El Paso County that should be protected. The second thing that was noteworthy, and just for those who may not be familiar with this poll was done in early March of this year. So this was done after the invasion of Ukraine, after the economy started taking a tremendous downturn. So this is fairly relevant data that is pretty relevant to the current circumstances that are facing our country and facing the economic environment that we live in. 75% of the folks in that survey said that they believe they get good value out of the library district for the resources that they provide to that the library district provides to the community. Once again, in this region, if you're a public institution, breaking 50% is pretty remarkable. 75%, pretty much every public institution in this country is trading you and wanting to get those types of numbers in their own public opinion research. Furthermore, 77% of the people said that they are satisfied with their experience using PPLD services. Once again, if you're a government institution, you want 77%. You're not touching that anywhere else. The really interesting thing here, and this is one number that was really fascinating to me when you take it into context with everything else that's in the survey, is comparing to the poll we did last September to the one that we did in March. One of the areas we did see a significant dip for a change in people's expectations and attitudes were if people believe that their taxes are too high or too low or just right. And what we did see was that there was a 20% increase from 40% of people thinking their taxes were too high to 60% of people thinking their taxes were too high. Now, one of the things to consider when you guys are looking at these numbers is this isn't really a reflection of people who people think their taxes are too high or too low, because people's taxes were the exact same in September of last year as they were in March of this year. Really what these types of numbers and these types of questions get at in a political poll is really trying to assess people's current economic status and how they feel like they're doing and whether it's easier or harder to make ends meet than it was a few months ago. And obviously with, the way the world was turned upside down in late February and the rising in inflation we've seen, it makes a lot of sense that people would be feeling a lot of economic pressure now that they didn't feel in September of last year. However, one of the fascinating things about that though is despite, people's changes in attitudes towards their current tax base and whether the taxes are too high or too low, the support for the library district placing an initiative on the ballot and potentially going forward and asking voters for a tax increase, those numbers remain stable. And that was actually something that was really fascinating to me as somebody who looks at these numbers all the time. And I spend a good portion of my life looking at political polls and trying to understand and disseminate them. To have a community that says 60% of the folks says we feel that the economic burden is too high right now, but we still support the library district and your efforts to potentially go to the ballot. To me, as somebody who's a political consultant and does this for a living, was pretty remarkable. And I think that puts the library in pretty unique space within government institutions in El Paso County and across the country, because I guarantee you, citizens aren't willing to fund just everything that's put in front of them. They are very choosy and cautious about what they choose to invest their hard-earned dollars in, especially in difficult economic environments. And so that is kind of what we're seeing and what I am seeing from a political environment here is, number one, the polling does demonstrate that if you guys are go to the ballot, nothing is for certain. I can't guarantee that you're going to be successful in November. What I will say is economic and the societal environment right now isn't as rosy and positive as you would ideally like to go to the ballot in. But there's also a few recent changes here in the local state environment in Colorado that actually make me kind of more favorable towards 22 than a future election cycle. And namely what that is for me is on June 27th of this year, we had our primaries in the state of Colorado where the Democrats and the Republicans both put forward their nominees for the general election. And what came out of that was, especially on the Republican side, they put forth candidates that are going to require very challenging elections this November. And what that actually means is now we're going to have very competitive Senate campaigns in this state. And what that actually does in a state like Colorado is now it's going to drive turnout. What that means is whether you're a Democrat or a Republican in the state, you're going to be making sure that your folks are turning out to vote this November. And what we know is that when we're in a competitive environment where there's going to be high turnout, what that naturally does is it makes your electorate younger. And one of the key measures between success, especially on tax measures, and knowing that you have a good environment to win in is knowing that you have a younger electorate, because regardless of partisan leanings, younger people are more likely to support tax efforts than other folks that you poll in, that you experience in an electorate. And so actually, while there are a lot of negatives that we can look at in this current environment, what I would say is when you take our polling data and combine it with an electorate that is actually rather stable this November compared to other states, when you compare it to November of 2023, when only 30% of this community will turn out, and when you furthermore compare it to 2024, when there's a lot of uncertainties about who's running for president, what the national climate and environment's going to look like, frankly, I'm somebody who likes to take the odds of the electorate that I know that is stable. And so from my personal perception, and this is actually validated by our pollster, WPII, I had a conversation with them earlier this week. They highly recommended that if you have the opportunity to go to a ballot, that this should be the year to do it because of the known quantities that exist, that there is no guarantees that our economy will be better. And even if you read economic forecasts, people are starting to say 2023 is most likely, if there's a recession, that it will start. And so for those reasons, my personal opinion on this matter would be that if you have the opportunity to pursue something this November, that those known quantities and knowing that we have a stable electorate, knowing that you've had polling data that's been validated twice through two very different economic conditions in this region, are both indicating that there's a strong desire of folks in the Pikes Peak region to have a vote on this issue. Would be that if you have the opportunity to do so, that my recommendation would be to go to the ballot. Now, I'm not telling you that to influence you in one way or another. That is your guys' choice to make as a board of whether you feel like that's in the best interest of the library. But in my professional opinion, if you guys had the opportunity, I would take the shot this November. So with that said, that's my introduction. I do want to make sure that I'm available and that Sarah's available. If you guys have any questions, I want to make sure I'm answering those so you guys feel like you have the full facts and information you need to make a decision about whether you want to take this first step.
Any questions?
So before we get to the vote, I was curious because this was on the agenda. If we had people wanting to make public comment about this, if we should hear from them before we actually go to a vote, because the way the agenda is written, it actually has public comment afterwards. And so I didn't know if we should open public comment up.
What did you say? I
I didn't hear what you said.
We'll just follow.
Okay, so we'll wait.
I would like to hear. If there's any.
That's kind of what I felt is I would like to hear from people who, if they're only related to this, not like all public comment, but just related to this initiative, the intent to participate.
Does anybody have any comments about it?
There was one person that signed up. I am not sure what topic she would like to speak on, but Beth Fisher has signed up for public comment.
We're not going to find comments. We're talking about this particular issue right now. If someone has a comment,
Is the comment about?
I'm not sure, but I can.
anybody have any comments for Anthony and the presentation he made about the information and the data that he was talking about? Anybody on the screen have any questions or comments they want to share with us right now on this, what Anthony's talked about?
I think
Beth said she is.
Yes, her comment is about the ballot initiative.
Okay, Beth. I think you're there yet.
I just unmuted myself. Am I good?
Yes.
Great. I did have one other slight thing besides this, but it relates. So a couple of months ago, I had made a public comment and asked why the fines were gone. And John Spears, who was still there at the time, said to message him, which I did, and he's left, and no one's fault, no problem. But that was one of my questions. And related to that, to bring it back to this ballot initiative, obviously I wasn't polled because I think this is a horrible idea. I think this is just, I mean, people are facing grocery bills that are twice as much. And yet I meant open with, hey, you should bring back the fines, but there's an amount of personal responsibility here that I feel like is missing, that we've not had for quite a while because of COVID. And then at the same time, you're wanting to ask the taxpayers for more money. And it's not specifically, from my understanding, and maybe I'm not as informed as I could be, but it's not that you're concerned about staff and their pay raise in inflation ratios or anything like that, but that it's just not clear. I mean, I love the library. I want to support the library, but I don't want to give you any more of my tax dollars. So that would be my opinion. And like I said, from the conversation just previous, obviously I wasn't pulled and I'm not the only person here, but it just seems like this is not the right time to do this. The inflation is going on and on and on and on, and it's not stopping. So that's the last place that I would like my tax dollars to go. So that was all I had to say.
Okay, we're talking less than $5 per household. So it's
Still,
yeah,
it's if you look at the library budget, it's kind of ridiculous. I think that you should do a better job with the budget that you have. No disrespect to anyone there, but there was a lot of money.
Okay, thanks. We appreciate your comments and certainly take it under advisement.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any comments or questions they would like to share with us? I think it's important to understand that the last time we had any type of support for the library like this was 1986. There's a large percentage of our staff that weren't even born then. There's 400,000 more people in Colorado Springs now than when this measure passed. So we're trying to support a population that's increased considerably. We haven't got any increase in budget to help do that. And there are library requirements in parts of the city that have not been provided for. That how are we going to get there from here? I mean, the bottom line is there's things we'd like to be able to do and continue with. And this increase is something that will help us do that. And that's the whole point. So
with all due respect, yes, we've grown by 400,000 since then, but we've also added additional houses, and since this is a property tax, that as our community grows, the revenue from property taxes also continue to rise. There's also accounting for, inflation and assessed value through all of this as well. And so I feel like that's a fairly, because we haven't had an increase and our population has grown, I feel like it's a weak argument for why we need to do it now, because our income has also grown proportionally.
okay. Anybody else have any comments?
I will say that I understand tax dollars are coming in, but you also have to understand that the needs of our population has grown as well at a greater extent than the tax dollars bring in. I believe that back when I moved here, and I'll say 1986, my daughter was 10 years old and she's now 46. That's how long it's been since there's been a tax increase for the library. And I mean, we have gone from books and mortar here to now we have all these electronic mediums, which are awesome for all of our constituents, but all of that is costing money, and it continues to grow and grow and grow. And the other thing is, if we would look at last year when our CFO did a presentation and did what would happen in the next 5 to 10 years, we're not going to have what we even think we have now, because things are going to there's going to be more things are going to be more expensive. And I guess the other thing that I'd like to think about too, and I have lots of friends that live up on the northeast end of town in Falcon and up even further north, and some of the smaller homes that they're building, a lot of our what you would consider affordable housing today is there, and they're young families with young children. And the library is about literacy. And if we build good people learning mechanisms and we have them in place, our whole city is going to be, we're all going to benefit from it. It's not just a few, it's all of us, from the young ones to the old ones. So I feel like if we don't move forward with this, what we're saying is in the end, we're satisfied with what we have, and we will probably have to cut things because there won't be money to continue what we have, much less build.
And right now, we're seeing cost of everything go up.
I agree.
We are seeing everyone in our community is watching their investments decline. And they're being asked to tighten their belts. They're being asked to cut things out of their budget to make sure that they can continue to afford the things that they have. I believe it is incredibly disrespectful for us to come to them and say, we know that you're having to tighten your belts right now. We understand that things are tough for you in an economic sense. We understand that when you're having to drive all over town, you're having to pay $5 for a gallon of gasoline. But we want you to pay us a little bit more. We're not willing to make that same cut. We're not willing to make the hard decisions and go through that with you. You know, we say that it's only $5 a month, but you know what? So
$5 period.
no, it's $5 a month. And, you know, my family's not going to lose any meals over the fact that, you know, $60 a year. But it's also narcissistic for us to think that that we are the ones who deserve that $60. There are other people that are out there doing tax initiatives. If you look historically, people don't tend to vote for every tax increase on the ballot. And we're going to force them to choose between roads or libraries or public safety or teacher pay, et cetera. Those are all tax initiatives that are coming onto the ballot.
And that's every time. Every time.
I'm not saying that it's not.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is right now, people will be even more choosy about what they decide to push. I don't want to be because this is going to increase the load. We say we want $60 a year. Other folks are saying they want $60 a year. Pretty soon, we're talking about families that are now having their tax bill increased by $200 every year. One of the biggest issues facing this community, if you look at the recent elections, what people were talking about was affordable housing. And all we're doing is making that an even bigger issue in our community by compounding that tax bill for these homeowners, for these young families that are trying to get it in. I personally don't want to be responsible for making young families that are living paycheck to paycheck, trying to get in there, choose between whether they feed their kids today or put gas in their car to get to work. That's not something that I'm willing to put up right now. I'm not saying that I'm against this initiative. What I'm saying is I'm against this initiative right now. I think if we waited, that would be better. And to the point that the recession would start in 2023, I feel like if that's what we're expecting, then it's dishonest that we go ahead and sign people up for a tax bill that they're going to have a harder time affording next year. That's actually going to cause us problems in the future because we'll actually have fewer taxpayers because they'll move to where it's going to be more affordable. And so by passing this right now, we actually have a bigger problem than what we have today.
Debbie?
Thanks. I appreciate what you say, Aaron, and I agree that there is a percent of the population that would find it a burden, and that affects me too. I feel that. I also, though, think it's not we're asking for your money. What we're doing is, as a community, I think we're deciding what kind of library district do we want as a community. And we don't get the answer to that question if we don't ask. And so one of the things that happens in an economic downturn is people use the library more. There's all kinds of research and data to support that. People use it for job training. People use it for starting their businesses. People use the library in lots of ways that if the library didn't offer those kinds of services, some people, a lot of people, would not have access to. So it also bothers me to think about potentially taking away access that some parts of our community depend on. And honestly, I don't think it's necessarily up to us sitting at the table to make all the decisions about what the library needs to look like and what the community needs to look like. My personal view is that when a community comes together and invests resources so that it lifts up people who don't have the same advantages, that's the kind of community I like, and that's kind of community I want. But you know what? we might decide to put it on the ballot, and we might ask people, is this what you want? Do you want us to keep doing what we're doing? And they might say no. And so then we need to, at that point, say, well, maybe we're not doing what the community wants. So I don't, in any event, I don't look at it as us saying, give us your money. I'm looking at it as us saying, we think we're a good investment for the community that pays dividends in helping people improve their lives. And if you agree, then make that investment with us. And if you don't, then don't. I mean, you know, I can tell you, and I thought a lot about this last night. I'd forgotten it until last night. But back in the 80s, when dinosaurs ruled the earth and there was no internet, I was unemployed, single, and broke. And I was here and I didn't have a network of people that I used to have to look for a job. I mean, I had nothing. And so I went to the library and I checked out books on how to look for a job and how to write a resume. But you know what? I didn't have a way to type my resume. So what I ended up doing was going around to office supply stores, asking if they had an old typewriter I could rent by the week so that I could type my resume. And it was kind of humiliating to do that. And if I could have gone to the library, oh my gosh, if I could have gone to 21C, if I could have gone and accessed the services that we have for people who are hunting for jobs or trying to improve their skills or help with resume writing, that would have made such a huge impact on me at that time. And we make those little impacts on lives every single day, but we don't see them because they're little. But they mean a lot to those people. So I guess my feeling is I want to keep making those impacts, and I don't want the roof to fall down, and I don't want our buildings to be in disrepair, and I don't want people to be uncomfortable when they're in there. So I don't see any other way except to ask people if they feel like that too. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie.
Anybody else have any comments to share?
So just to we're projecting that this is going to cost us $500,000 to get it onto the ballot. That's what I've been told.
Yes.
Yes.
Roughly, yes.
That is a huge investment to be wrong. You know, I like providing those services, and Debbie, I think I told you, I've told several people in this room, you know, my career that I have today is the same story that you have. I lived across from East Library. I went there. I was looking for a career change. I checked out books. I taught myself new skills, and here I am. So I absolutely get it. And those are services that we already provide. These are not we're not throwing books out just because we're in a recession. We're not getting rid of computers because we're in a recession. Those are still services that will be provided to the citizens of El Paso County, regardless of whether this passes or not. My concern, looking at these numbers, I've talked to a lot of people. We had pollsters come in with the school district, and we talked to them. We were polling roughly the same. We were about 54%, and we were advised that's really not good numbers for you to be looking at. Everything that I've talked to people is 60%. If you don't have 60% on a ballot measure, you don't persist. I know District 11 just last year, they were polling at 70%, and they lost by 12 votes. District 11 is a huge voting base within this county. We saw several tax increases fail last year. $500,000. What kind of services could we provide? I mean, we all saw that list that Taylor sent out last night of items. And, you know, I was thinking, as I was going through that list, I was thinking, what could we just go ahead and knock off that's guaranteed wins for our community, for our facilities, with that $500,000? It's not the risk that this is right now, specifically when we're starting to look at what the economy is doing. Because yes, this polling was done back in March. And as Mr. Carlson said, the 60% doesn't mean that they're paying too high. The tax dollars, the tax bill that they got did not change between September and March. But perception changed. perception has changed even more now than it was then, because we're talking about the economic factor. So even this was at the start. This was before everybody's Bitcoin dropped, right? That they'd invested in. So, I get that this is a snapshot in time, but we're even further down the hole than where this was then. And we don't know what it's going to look like in November. And $500,000 could do a lot of good in our community without that risk of failure, when frankly, I have very low confidence that this would pass in right now. And I just don't see that this is the wisest use of our funds.
I think what I would add to that is that $500,000 fee that you pay to get on the ballot stands regardless of whether there's an election, every election cycle. If you go next year, it's going to be $500,000. If you go in 2024, it'll still be $500,000. And if I could tell you that you're going to win every election, I wouldn't be sitting here in this room, because I'd be running much bigger elections, because that's not a gift or a skill that anybody has. And so if you're waiting for the moment where you feel guaranteed you're going to win, there's never going to be a ballot that you feel qualified to go and pursue. But what this polling does do is it gives you a snapshot that this community is ready and eager to put something onto the ballot and have their voices said on it. Whether that's successful or not is up to the voters to decide. And it's also up to you as a board that when you're making decisions about the future of library services and programming, and if there's going to be cuts or any significant cuts back in programming, is that a decision that an unelected board should make, or is that a decision that the voters should make? And to me, that's a decision that you guys have to make as a board. But what I can tell you, and it's kind of fun doing this with Tom in the room, because Tom does this for a living, looking at polling data, is that typically whenever you do polling on things such as where people feel like, with economic factors, you honestly want to get that polling done as close to the shock as possible. And so we actually timed this poll unwittingly really well, because in mid-March when we did this poll, it was right after gas was shooting up. It obviously shot up higher. It was right when folks were feeling the impact of feeling like, are we on the verge of World War III? And so what we know about human behavior is humans are very quickly adaptable to current circumstances and environments. And people, while it's not a great economic environment right now, it's an economic environment that folks have adjusted to and are probably a little bit more comfortable with today than they were in March, when everything was in upheaval and we're feeling the immediate shocks of inflation, rising gas prices, a huge conflict in Europe. And so as somebody who looks at these polls, if you're waiting for a guarantee, you guys are never going to go to the ballot. If you're waiting for that opportunity and knowing that there's going to be sunshine and daylight on the other side of it, in this world that we're living in today, you can't guarantee that the time is going to be next year, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, a decade from now. And so I think perhaps one of the questions you may want to ask yourselves is this a decision that you guys want to make as a board of what does the future of this library look like? Or is it a decision that should be left to the voters of this county to determine what kind of library district and what kind of funding and support they want to provide to your programs and services?
Comments? Anybody else?
So I want to understand, if we do nothing and we continue to move forth as we have been, with the number of branches that we have, understanding that there is income that's coming in based on the growth of our community. However, taking into also consideration partners like Urban Renewal Authority and offsetting potential revenues for a pretty good chunk of time. Are we putting the library district in a place where then they have to think about what consequences it has for their team? You think about the intention for innovation, the expansion of opportunities through services and delivery mechanisms that are different from what it was in 1986. And I'm not trying to repeat what you're saying, Debbie, but I do want to ask the question of what would we lose, but then also make the point that we are moving at the speed of technology, and not everybody has that access and opportunity. And the library is a means to be able to access that where you might not have been able to before. So if we are trying to stay in a space of moving forward supporting the community for the greater good, I don't believe there is ever a positive, like, right time for anything, and we cannot predict the future. But I do want to acknowledge the fact that the number of innovations that have occurred that you may not even consider as an innovation when you come into this building, when you access things online that are connected to the library. I mean, creating opportunities is what the library is about. Things like citizenship that people seek because they are coming from another country for war purposes, for a better future for their family, etc. The library opens that opportunity that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Things like English as a second language, things like building different skill sets like culinary. These are things that maybe the average public does not understand the library offers, but the fact that it's available to advance and provide opportunity for individuals is something that we need to be able to speak about so that our greater public understands the value. It is not just books. While books are the main reason why libraries were created, to seek and provide education and opportunity, it's the opportunity piece that I think we really need to be able to understand and focus on how we can then advance our entire community as a result. So that being said, if we were to continue thinking about the number of branches that we have across our community, and knowing that there are deficits in some versus others, we've had to cut the number of hours and we've had to reduce the number of staffing. We can't even find staff. There are so many other factors at play, right? So how are we creating, I guess, a space where we have our current staff, giving current staff the opportunity to say, okay, this is what we need to do, and not have them make those hard decisions to say, oh, well, I guess we should not staff the Teen Resource Center, when that may be the only place that some young people have as feel safe. So I look at it from that maybe, other side, the whatever side that is, just to take into consideration what would we lose. Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of shoestring budget types of things happening. And it's not just the library. It is probably every entity. And we're all trying to do our best. And because we appear like we can function, it doesn't mean that we're functioning well.
Is it a question for me?
Yeah, it's a question for you.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a really long question.
I know, we were just like,
But I wanted to also share my
and
thoughts.
I will do my best to use all my skills to interpret and answer your question,
Sorry.
but no, it's okay. So first of all, I want to start with this fact that since 2012, PPLD has lost ground in per capita funding, slipping from the 8th to the 11th out of 13 when it comes to Colorado, like in Colorado. And as my 2 cents is here, that someone who is not originally from this country, but I call myself a proud American because I made a choice to become American. And one of the important things about this country is a democracy. And I believe democracy in such a way, and that's, I'm also looking at everyone. So that democracy is, to my understanding and what I experience in my life, that's the voice is given to people to make their choice. That's my 2 cents about that. And I never want to experience certain circumstances in my life or for my kids to experience that we as a country lose that sense and value of democracy. To answer your question, Amina, I know that I had some conversations with all of you, the Board of Trustees, and also I'm looking on the screen because Debbie and Aaron, a lot of people are there. So I'm trying to make an eye contact with all of you. The thing is that we as a library district, I don't believe we will be able to keep going with the current restrict funding that we have, continue providing the services that we strive to provide. Yes, and we do, and I agree with you that those decisions should not fall on our staff members or even our library managers or our public service directors. That should be the Board of Trustees and administration leadership team going forward. We will face time that we would need to make tough decisions, and we will. Again, it's very hard for me to say that. We're already getting a lot of requests, even from our public sessions that we were holding, that our community, they want us to be open longer. They want us to have libraries in many locations. And our explanation, and my explanation is we cannot do it right now. Yes, Mina, I don't believe in all of that Board of Trustees that we will be able to continue providing that. I know that also I was told that previously there were some creative decisions made, creative funding found for some libraries. But I want to actually publicly and openly acknowledge that right now 21C Library, when it comes to public services portion of it, we have 39 staff. And again, that is not enough staffing. We get questions about that, why our studios are not open, why our makerspace are not open. That library was open, and unfortunately, some of the decisions were made. Again, our staff had to sacrifice. So that's where we are. And again, I understand. I literally understand economic struggles. I understand that not only from the perspective of the United States of America, but I grew up in certain time of period in my time that it was hard sometimes to buy a loaf of bread, standing in a line after the Soviet Union collapsed, when we had a voucher to go and get a loaf of bread. And it did not mean that time, did not matter what kind of family you were from. I do understand that. I do understand struggles, but also I understand that library is a place where people can come and get resources. And my 2 cents is here that we as a library district, we would need to let and inform our community why we are making those decisions, because we will face those tough decisions that it include many. But also my belief is that as again, a proud naturalized American citizen, we do need, that would be my recommendation to the Board of Trustees, that the voice needs to be given to the people, because that's this country was founded on. And that's my 2 cents, and let them speak, community members, if they want us to expand our services and what kind of library district they want us to see. So I'm not going to provide a laundry list, all of the things that we would need to cut, because I don't believe this is a platform or like actually space and right now, but that's a reality, and I will be coming to the Board of Trustees and asking all of you to help us to make those decisions.
So just understanding that, considering the factors, regardless, I think we have difficult decisions to
Yes.
make. And
Yes,
And if we don't provide an opportunity to even consider, then that becomes on us to then figure out
Mhm.
what we then need to reduce in the
Yes.
budgets in order to move forward as a district.
yes. And as a board of trustees, and you are our governing board, and I respect your opinion. This is my recommendation, but whatever decision you make today and however you vote, we will implement that as a district.
So can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Because this is kind of before I came on, but I know that there have been TIFs that have passed that divert revenue
What's a TIF?
from the library district out. So if, my question is, how much revenue are we pushing in that direction
Mhm.
that we are not getting, that we're now asking the taxpayers to make up for the decisions that we made previously that put us in?
You mean
This
the board of
situation.
trustees that voted
Yes.
before? Les, I'm sure you were here. Do you remember that amount?
So if I'm not mistaken, Mike ran a schedule about a year and a half ago that showed that with the current projects from urban renewal, it's about 17 million. During the course of the 25-year periods that those projects are in play. we actually have some people from urban renewal who might be able to correct me and provide more accurate numbers, but that's what I seem to recall.
I understanding that and hearing that it's a big number, right? Like that could have gone to different investments, but if we don't also, if we do not consider how we work together as an effective partner in order to get projects like this in place, we provide stagnant growth for our broader community. So, I mean, it's this push-pull of there is necessary advancements that have to occur that then offset something, yes. And also, there also needs to be this understanding that we live in this community, we believe in the space, we love it for whatever reason. We need to also consider why we should continue to invest in this space that we live in. Oh, Jariah has an answer.
No, I was just gonna add, so I don't have the exact number, Aaron, for you, on that, we could certainly get that for you too. I will say, the word divert probably isn't the best use of words for it because the project's not gonna happen without the funding.
Sure.
So when we look at these, there's a gap in place. With the type of projects that we're doing in the public infrastructure that we're building, they're not gonna happen unless we have broad support from every board going through them. You guys didn't have that say pre-2016. That was all handled through city council. Up to this point from 2016 forward, the library has been supportive of those projects, but they have not generated really a whole lot of increment even for the developers. We've got projects in 2018 that haven't generated a dime yet. So they haven't diverted. The other thing I'd add is that these projects that we build in bring in other projects around them and they become attraction points for new housing, new businesses, et cetera, which is growing the pie for everybody in the taxing district, whether it's the library, whether it's the school, whether it's the county, et cetera. So that's the only comment I wanted to throw out.
That's great. So we're expecting, as these projects get completed, increased revenue coming from those projects.
Absolutely.
That's great. I like increased revenue through natural.
Offset is what I use.
$680,000 a year. Basically, is that 17 million breaks out.
Sure.
And I think the fact that that particular issue, the fact that the library board is actually aware of what's happening and is a part of these conversations is the positive aspect that's occurred as a result of the legislation change. So again, like the library didn't even have a say before. So I think that's a positive move.
I think it's great that we're expecting increased funding coming up from those projects. That's great.
Any other comments or questions? All right, Anthony, thank you.
Aaron?
Aaron?
Nope.
Okay, Anthony, thank you very much. Appreciate you providing that information.
I think that's
Okay. Next item is the intent to participate in the 22 election.
I move that the Board of Trustees approve its intent to participate in the general election of 2022. In the 2022 general election.
Can we clarify exactly what that is? We may know what it is, but not everybody may know what that is. So an intent means that.
Should we get a second on record before we?
Okay, sure, thanks for that. Second, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Now we can
Any
have
discussion?
All right, so intent means that as a board, we're planning on having an initiative on the ballot for 2022. That does not mean that the board is going to do it. It means that we're intending to. So there's a lot-
It notifies the clerk's office that
Correct.
we are planning on participating.
Right, and the deadline for notifying them is the 29th of this month, so.
So that's why we're making this vote right now.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Hang on, should we go person to person? Or do you want to do this together all at once?
We can do it individually if you like.
Because to me, this is a big decision.
Yeah,
so-
roll call.
Okay. All right, Aaron Sol,
No.
yes.
Yes.
Scott,
I will say no for a few reasons. One is the economy as it is today. Another reason is as far as I've been told, we will not have any support from council or the commissioners at this point. So that's a big decision. So I'm gonna say that.
okay, Debbie,
Yes.
Aaron,
No.
Yes.
So you're gonna be the deciding vote, Dr. Stoll.
okay, I will, yes. So motion passes. We'll move on to the intent.